So, this happened when I was about 14. My grandparents lived in this old farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, about a 20-minute drive from the nearest town. It was the kind of house you'd only expect to see in a horror movie. Creaky floors, dark hallways, rooms that always felt just a little too cold, even in the summer. Anyway, one summer, my parents had to go out of town for a few days, and I was sent to stay with my grandparents. They were getting up there in age, and I liked spending time with them, so it was no big deal. I had my own room, which was on the second floor at the end of the hallway. The room had this big, old-fashioned mirror on the wall, and honestly, I hated it. Every time I looked in that thing, I felt like something was just off. The first night I stayed, I woke up around 3 a.m. with this feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't like a nightmare, but it was this deep, uneasy feeling. The air was heavy. I could hear the wind howling outside, and the house creaked like it always did. But there was something else, something moving. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the room with me, but when I checked, it was just the darkness. I turned over and tried to go back to sleep. That's when I heard it. There was a faint tapping, like fingernails on wood, coming from the far corner of the room. I froze. My heart started pounding. The tapping was rhythmic, almost deliberate, but it wasn't from anywhere that made sense. It didn't come from the floor or the walls. It seemed to come from the mirror. I stared at the mirror, but it was just reflecting the dark room behind me. I'm not proud to admit it, but I reached for my phone and tried to use the flashlight to see what was going on. I swung the beam of light around the room, hoping to catch something, anything moving, but there was nothing there. I tried to brush it off, but that tapping wouldn't stop. It kept getting louder and closer, like something was slowly moving across the room toward me. My breathing was getting faster. I turned on the light and the sound immediately stopped. I sat there in the quiet for a long time, not daring to move, but I knew I wasn't going to sleep again that night. Eventually, I got out of bed, grabbed my phone, and went downstairs to my grandparents' room. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but I had to make sure I wasn't just being paranoid. My grandmother was awake when I walked in, and she just looked at me with this knowing expression, like she was expecting me. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asked in this soft, calm voice. What? I stuttered. "The tapping," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "It's been happening for years." I didn't know what to say. She told me that when they moved into that house, they found out there had been strange things going on long before them. The house was old, built in the 1800s, and there were rumors that it was haunted. But it wasn't the kind of haunting you see in movies. It was subtle, slow. She said the tapping was the sign that it was getting closer. The thing in the mirror. She said the only thing you could do was leave it alone. Never try to confront it, and whatever you do, never look into the mirror after midnight. I spent the rest of the night in their room. In the morning, I went back up to my room, and the mirror was gone. I never saw it again after that. My grandparents told me they'd gotten rid of it a long time ago, but the whole thing stuck with me. A few years later, when my grandparents passed away, I had to go back to the house to help clear things out. I was older now, but I was still uneasy around that place. I found the mirror hidden in the attic. I almost wanted to look into it, just to see if the tapping would come back, but something stopped me. I don't know if it was fear or something else, but I left it where I found it, and I never went back to that house again. I'll never forget the night I came home late from work, about 2 years ago. I had been working a double shift, and it was well past midnight by the time I finally pulled into my driveway. I lived alone in a small house in a quiet neighborhood, and to be honest, I liked the peace. It was the kind of place where nothing ever really happened, and that's how I liked it. I got out of my car and immediately felt that strange sensation you sometimes get when you're being watched. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just the exhaustion messing with me, or maybe it was the fact that it was pitch black and the streetlights didn't reach my driveway. As I made my way to the front door, I noticed something odd. My porch light was flickering. It had been fine when I left earlier that morning, but now it was doing this weird strobe effect, like it was trying to signal something. I brushed it off and opened the door, but as soon as I stepped inside, I got this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. I turned on the hallway light, locked the door behind me, and just stood there for a moment, listening. The house was dead silent, too silent. I walked to the kitchen to grab a drink, and that's when I saw it. A small figure just standing in the corner of my living room, almost in the shadows. It wasn't anything I could really make out at first, just a shape. But then I realized it was a person. I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest. This person, whoever they were, was completely still. Just standing there, not moving, not making a sound. I could see their outline, but nothing more. "Hello," I said, trying to steady my voice. I don't know why I spoke. I should have just backed out and called the cops. But something made me ask anyway. No response, no movement. I slowly reached for my phone in my pocket, trying to keep my eyes on the figure. But before I could call anyone, the figure spoke. Not a whisper, but loud enough to make my blood run cold. "Why are you here?" it said. I didn't even think. I turned and bolted for the door, slamming it behind me. I stood outside trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever that thing was, it was still inside my house, watching me. I never went back into that house. I stayed with friends until I could get a locksmith to come change all the locks. They never found any signs of forced entry, and no one could explain the figure. It's been years now and I've moved out of that place. But every time I see someone standing still in a dark corner, I can't help but wonder, is it the same thing, just waiting for me to come back?